All right. Ethan, are we on and everything? Awesome, thank you. Okay, so real quick premise before we jump into chapter 5. So far, we've walked through the first 4 chapters of James, and let's be honest, they're not easy. As we were talking about beforehand, James is a great book to make you feel wonderful about your life and how much you are just failing miserably when it comes to living out your faith. And as I talked about the very first time we talked about James and dealt with how Martin Luther saw this as nothing more than just a book of straw. He didn't see any basis behind it because he was all that you're saved by grace, and he thought that James was saying it's all about works. But James, as we talked about, is the other side of that coin. Paul and James fought the same fight from 2 different angles. Paul fought grace. James fought it's about how we live our lives as well. And so we have to understand that that's what's called a tension-filled parallel, meaning it has to be there together in order to work. And so as we go into chapter 5, we're going to be dealing with a group of people that James is calling out because James does not hold back. And so, as we've done every night for the past several weeks, I'm going to ask one thing of y'all, is that y'all don't, at one point in time, put somebody else's name when we start reading through this scripture. Because that's what we tend to do. We tend to deflect off of what God's trying to do in our lives by thinking about somebody else and how much they need to hear this. And so again, I'm not really worried about y'all in some of these things because I'm not, and you'll see that very soon why I say that. But in other ways, it's the heart behind it, and the heart behind it might be different than what I see on the outside. Does that make sense? So we're going to go in James chapter 5. We're starting in verse 1, and it says this. Let me see if it's actually going to work. Sweet. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasures in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You condemned and murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you. Be patient, therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and late rains. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. As an example of suffering and patience, brothers, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Behold, we consider those blessed who remained steadfast. You have heard of the steadfastness of Job, and you have seen the purpose of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. And we're going to stop there tonight because the rest of the chapter takes really the whole thing and puts it together, and I don't want to jump too much into that. I want to give us enough meat, if you will, for next week. But if we go back to verse 1, it talks about the rich. Now, what does that really mean? You see, everyone has a different representation and a different understanding of what rich is. But this is what he's talking about here. It's those with more than they need to live. James here condemns them for not being wealthy because scripturally it's okay to be wealthy. There's nothing wrong with being wealthy. However, it's the heart behind it, but it's for misusing their resources. Unlike the believing rich of Timothy's congregation that we see in 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19, these are the wicked wealthy who profess Christian faith and have associated themselves with the church, but whose real God is money. That's their focus. That's everything that they have. And for prostituting the goodness and generosity of God, they can anticipate only punishment. So what this really boils down to is this, is that James is proclaiming the worthlessness of riches, not the worthlessness of the rich. So I want y'all to understand that I'm not condemning those who have money. I'm condemning the stuff that we focus on with the money. Okay? And I'll talk about that here in a moment. Today's money will be worthless when Christ returns. It doesn't matter how much you've stored up. It doesn't matter how much gold bricks you have. It doesn't matter how much Bitcoin you have or whatever it is. It's all worthless the day that Jesus shows back up. And so accumulating that kind of treasure might be worthwhile to you, but in God's kingdom, it's worthless. Money is not the problem, though. Christian leaders need money to live, to support their families. Missionaries need money to help them spread the gospel. Churches need money to work effectively. It is the love of money, though, that leads to evil. 1 Timothy 6:10 says this, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs, and that this causes people to oppress others to get more." Money is one of those things that we have this idea in our head that says if we can just get this much money in the bank, then we'll be good. I won't need any more. I won't desire any more. I won't want any more. However, when we get that much money in the bank, we look at that and say, that's not enough. I've got to have more. And that number slides greater and greater and greater because we start to focus on the money rather than focusing on the ministry. That is not only for the individual, that is also for the church. We have to make sure that our focus is not on money, but instead is on the Lord. And see, what it gets down to here is he put down those who place their arrogant trust in things that are doomed to decay. There are people that place their trust in banks. There's people that place their trust in institutions. I remember my grandmother one time when I was in high school, she decided to gift my brother and I stock. She decided she was going to buy stock, and she was going to buy it in these companies that would never die, companies that would be around forever. And so she called me, and rather than calling us and asking us where we would like stock from, she decided that I needed stock in Coca-Cola and that my brother needed stock in Disney. And so she bought that stock. At the exact same time that she bought that stock, you could have bought Amazon stock. And we tried to get her to buy Amazon stock, and she said, "Oh no, I would never do that for y'all." You're talking about a lot of stock. You're talking 10 shares, right? Not a lot of money. She was like, "It's destined to pay out dividends of thousands over the years." Within 2 years of my brother having his Disney stock, it was worth a fraction of what she paid for it because Disney started tanking again. This is before Marvel re-energized everything, and the Disney stock got to the point where it was kind of worthless. That was also when Coca-Cola had that whole huge outbreak, I think in, it was overseas. I want to think it was like Bali or something. The water was bad. They used to make the Coke. A whole bunch of people got sick. Their stock took a huge hit. And we bank all these things on stocks. We bank all these things on bonds. And that's not a bad thing, to plan for the future. But when that's our only focus, then we are missing the point. Dave Ramsey puts it this way, and we've taught this class before. We've taught Financial Peace University, and he put it this way, that you need to live like no one else so that one day you can live and give like no one else. And his whole point is saving for the future so that when you hit that retirement age, you can actually bless other people. You're not just trying to get by with what you have, but instead you can actually bless people with what you have done. And so that's one of the things that I believe the Lord desires for us. And he gives people money to see what they do with it. He gives them blessings to see how they use it, and we tend to not use it well a lot of times. You see, nothing more clearly reveals the state of a person's heart than his view of money and material possessions. Many who profess faith in Christ and validate their claim to genuine saving faith through their opulent, indulgent, materialistic lifestyles, which is a clear indication that they serve wealth and not God. Matthew 6:24 says, "No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money." Church, do you realize that when I was in high school and into college, there was a church in Dallas, Texas that spent millions of dollars to build their entire church out of glass? And it was this humongous, beautiful, gorgeous thing because they wanted to make a statement. Within 5 years of building that megachurch, it died because it became about the building and not about the ministry. It became about the money and not about Jesus. And I can give you countless stories of countless churches that everything became about that dollar bill instead of about Jesus Christ. And when that happened, the Lord removed his spirit and said, y'all go have at. And the Lord punished those churches. And it's not because they did something unethical. It's not because they went out and scrounged money from other people. No, it's because they shifted their focus away from where it should have been. Is that not us in our lives? We shift our focus away just for a moment, just a little bit, and go to Peter walking on water. What happens the moment he took his eyes off Jesus? He started to sink. And churches do the same thing the moment they take their eyes off of Jesus. Church, a pastor will not save a church. He won't. He will help lead and guide and pull a church back to Jesus, but he can't be the one that saves the church. And if we expect a pastor to be the mighty silver bullet, we're already lost. A youth pastor can't save a youth group. He can't save a town. When we as a body focus on the gospel and focus on Jesus Christ, then Jesus does something in us that we can't do. And only he can accomplish. And then when it happens, we turn back and go, wow, look at what Jesus did, because we couldn't have done that. We get so caught up, and I say this we as the Big C corporate church, but I also say this we as in us, get so caught up with what's in the bank account rather than what's being taught. We get caught up in what's out, not out there, but what's in here. And when we focus on what's in here, we're focused on the wrong thing. Why were the Pharisees and the Sadducees so not despised by Jesus, but approached and confronted by Jesus? Was because it was all about what they desired and what they wanted. And the moment we go that route, we have missed what our calling is supposed to be. But if we go on to verse 2, it says, your riches have rotted and your garments are moth-eaten. James points out the folly in hoarding food, expensive clothing, or money, all of which is subject to decay, theft, fire, or other forms of loss. Let me ask you, Woohoo! Oh man, I don't like this mic. Sorry, everybody. All right. Better? A lot better? And I'm sure my phone's about to go off again to tell me they can hear me or not hear me, so that'll be good. All right. We'll make it work. Okay. Where was I? Oh, cross. So I would get the cross because it signifies something so much more, because it's a symbol of what the legacy of my grandparents was, and that legacy has carried over to us and to the younger generations. And I always want that cross to hang in my house, and I always want that to be something. But the thing is, if it meant dying, I would have to let it go. When those pieces of paper or those items become more important than our own lives, then they have taken a status in our lives that they do not deserve. They're a piece of wood or metal or something else. And the thing is that we will die for that, but we won't live for Jesus. And that's what he's really dealing with here. And those that were in the rich is that they focused on hoarding stuff and having stuff, and it's not about the stuff. It's about the one that allowed you to get the stuff. You see, it goes on to say in verse 3 again, the gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure in the last days. And so the last days is talking about here is that time when Jesus is getting ready to come back. All of those things are going to weigh you down. All of those things are going to hold you back. One of the things, if you talk to students today, they'll jokingly but seriously tell you they're afraid of a zombie apocalypse for whatever reason. And they think that stuff is going to save them. Or they think that the world's going to crash and their stuff will get them out of it, but stuff holds us back. It's okay. I know not y'all. The girls are like, zombies? What? Yeah, y'all are the first to go. It's okay. We just have to run faster than y'all. You're good, right? But the thing is that it goes on to say this in verse 4, behold, the wages of the laborer who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. These rich people that James is dealing with are people that gained wealth because they had everybody work for them, and they would withhold payment. So rather than paying them what they had earned, paying them what they had actually gained, they would take only a fraction and say, here you go. And so there's countless places, Leviticus 19:13, Deuteronomy 24:14 and 15, talk about that this is strictly forbidden within Jewish culture. That if you have someone work your field as a day laborer, you have to pay them before the sun goes down by Jewish law. And if we get to a point that we stop paying people for those services they give us, then we are defrauding them so we can stay more wealthy. And that's how these men built their wealth. And it says that you're going to upset the Lord of hosts or the Lord of Sabbath. And that's a untranslated Greek word meaning host or the Lord of the armies, if you will. The one who hears the cries of the defrauded laborers, James warns, is the Lord of hosts, the name of God frequently used within the Old Testament, the commander of the armies of heaven. And the Bible teaches that angels will be involved in the judgment of unbelievers. So everyone talks about that, oh, my loved one perished and now they're an angel. They are not an angel. That would be a step down for mankind because we are elevated higher than the angels in heaven. But God will send the angels in those last days. And in Matthew 13:39 through 41, 49, 16:27, 25:31, 2 Thessalonians 1:7 and 8 deals with the fact that God will send his angels out like workers amongst a field to collect those that are his, all the wheat, and bring them in. And the tares, the ones that were acting like believers, acting like church people, playing the game, will be cast out and burned. Angels are a part of what God has planned for us. But the thing he's dealing with here with the rich are those that have lived in luxury. Now, let's have some fun for a moment. I don't want to get too far off on this because we could spend hours on this. Who is someone who has lived in luxury? Give me a name. Okay, Donald Trump. Joe Biden. All right. And it ends there. Other people. We're not going any farther than those two names. Done. Other people that have lived in luxury. What? All of us. And Yeah, even the people that are dirt poor here are in the 99th percentile when it comes to finances for the rest of the world. Rockefeller. All the students have no idea who you just mentioned, but it's okay. Beyonce. Yes, a grandma says Beyonce. That makes me happy, right? Anybody in Hollywood that live a life of luxury. They live a life that is so disconnected with the rest of the world. Every professional athlete is disconnected with the rest of the world. Why? Because the moment you start making millions of dollars a year, in my opinion, my little bitty opinion, you no longer get to talk about what it's like to live without, because you no longer are part of that category. And what we are seeing in the news over the past couple of years is what happens in true luxury and true wealth as they eventually run out of things to buy, and so they start buying people. Just watch the news right now, and I can list off a whole list that all their houses have been raided. They've found secret floors and secret rooms in their homes that were used strictly for the purpose of whatever they wanted, all because they had wealth. What the Bible says is that wealth, not in itself, is condemned, but that wealth will eventually poison us to doing things we would have never done before. Because the search of that wealth and the action to obtain that wealth will twist everything that we think is right. There are churches that their process is, and their thought process is, well, if you're called by God, that means you're just going to serve, and we can pay you pennies, and it doesn't matter. There are churches in our area that's how they feel. And you talk to most retired pastors are still working. Why? Because guess what? They were paid pennies to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They're told to not worry about their families, that God will take care of their families, but they need to work for the church. I'm just being honest. Right? And so is that meaning that the church is going to be blessed by God? But you know what the Bible said to the pastors? They did this to the prophets as well. And we're going to deal with that here shortly. So rejoice in the fact that you're being persecuted. How is it that the people that hired you are the ones that persecute you? It happens pretty easily, actually. But that's a whole other topic, a whole other day. But when we live in this luxury, what we're actually doing is we're getting ready for a day of slaughter. Do you realize that if you really like this little steer calf and you decide you want to eat this little steer, you're going to take them, and the first thing you're going to do once they're weaned is you're going to what's called feedlot them, and you're going to pull them into their own pen, and you are going to just feed them as much as they want to eat. And you're going to get them as fat as you possibly can, and about 6 months of age, you're going to butcher them because they're going to be nice and fat and juicy. That's what James is saying for people that live a luxurious lifestyle and make everything about money, is that we are fattening ourselves up for when God's judgment shows up, he's going to butcher us like we would butcher a calf. He's going to take care of it, and it's going to be done. When our focus is anything but Jesus, we are fattening ourselves up on that stuff. It can be stuff, it can be fame, it can be prestige, it can be our name in the stars. It doesn't matter what it is. But if we do not focus on what we should be doing, verse 6 is plain about it, you have condemned yourself. And to those that you have wronged, you have murdered them. Why is he saying this? Is because in this day and age, they had day laborers that they had to be paid at the end of the day because they couldn't eat if they didn't get paid. Their families could not eat if they didn't get paid. And so if you withheld their wages so you could keep it for yourself, then God said, I'm going to hold you accountable for murder because they died because you didn't pay them the way you should. Church, we should never, as an individual, be considered someone who doesn't pay for services rendered. That's individually, but that's also as a church. You see, this describes the next step in the sinful progression of the rich. Hoarding led to fraud, which led to self-indulgence. Finally, the overindulgence has consumed the rich to the point that they will do anything to sustain that lifestyle. If you don't believe me, all you have to do is get on Netflix right now, and there's a whole documentary on Ashley Madison and the website Ashley Madison. And it is crazy what people do. Some of y'all remember that whole debacle back in 15 when it got hacked. Most people don't anymore because it's gotten so quiet. But culture today, Hollywood today, the world today, they will do anything to stay out of the news. They'll pay off lawyers, they'll pay off colleges so that their kids can go to these Ivy League schools. They'll do all it, and all of it's being found out. Why? Because the Lord said, I will take your sin that is in secret and I will make it known to all those around you. It's going to be known, church, if we try to hide those things. God will make it known. The condemned comes, that word comes from the word meaning to sentence. And the implication is that the rich were using the courts to commit judicial murder. Is that any different than today? No. All you got to do is go to Dallas about 10 years ago, and a kid killed somebody and got off because he was too affluent to know the difference. And that started a precedent that now you can defend, and your defense is, I'm too rich to understand the consequences for my actions. Do you realize that that's actually in the court systems now? That's where our world has come to. See, the righteous man is a defenseless person, probably a poor laborer. Poor people who could not even pay their debts were thrown into prison and forced to sell all their possessions. And here's the crazy part. They were even at times forced to sell their own families to pay off the debt. So what that really meant, if I was going to break it down really, really simply, what that means is that, say, Stephen owes a debt, and there's 3 of his kids in the room, and Stephen gets to decide, okay, I get to sell off which one, and each one will go for a different rate, because whether they're male or female, whether they're at age appropriate to marriage or not, whatever it is, he could start selling off his kids to pay the debt. Breaking up families, destroying life, and if you buy someone, they're your possession. That's what was happening here. And so God called it murder when these people starved to death because these guys were just trying to hold out. But we see a shift here. We see a change in verse 7 because it says, be patient, therefore, brothers. And so remember, James is talking to those that had fled Jerusalem because of their faith, right? He's talking to those that have run from God, not run from God, run from people because of the persecution. And so he's, again, telling them this lovely word, be patient. 1 Thessalonians 5:14, and we urge you, brothers, admonish the idle, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, and be patient with all of them. Now, I'm going to be honest. If you ever want to have a really fun prayer that's just going to give you an amazing opportunity in which to practice patience, pray for patience. I'm telling you, oh my goodness, I have kids. Hey, can you pray for patience? I just start laughing, and they go, no, don't pray. I said, no, you said it. I'm praying for patience for you right now. Because I made the mistake one time of praying for patience, and the Lord gave me an amazing opportunity in which to be patient. I did not do well in that opportunity. Not at all. Now I pray for strength to get through the situation. I don't pray for patience anymore, but the thing is that God is telling us, be patient. You see, those who face trials and persecution risk losing their patience with their circumstances, with other people, even with God himself. Recognizing that danger, James exhorted his readers to be patient in the midst of their persecution. Why should we be patient? Because there is a coming. There is the coming of the Lord, the second coming of Jesus Christ, and that should motivate us to endure mistreatment. You want to know why pastors, endure mistreatment? And I'm speaking very generally here. Pastors will endure mistreatment because all we desire is to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. That's it. And we don't want to be held responsible for anyone that we didn't go to and share with that the Lord said go. That's it. But that also means suffering sometimes. That also means difficulties. See, it talks about here that the early and the late rains, and what that really boils down to is this, is that in the early rains in Israel would fall in October and November. That would get the ground to where they could actually plow it up, they would plant it, and then the late rains, which would cause harvest, wouldn't come until March or April. And so you had these many months in between, and you didn't just sit idly by and do nothing, but instead you had to constantly work the ground, till the ground, make sure that all the weeds were gone, make sure everything was where it needed to be, so that the moment that rain hit, your crop was ready to receive it. So you don't sit idly by, but yet you constantly are waiting and desiring for the Lord to show back up. Galatians 6:9 says, "And let us not grow weary in doing good, for in the due season or the proper time we will reap a harvest if we don't give up." 2 Timothy 4:8 says, "Henceforth there I laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing." Or Titus 2:13, "Henceforth there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award me on that day, and not only me, but to all those who loved him." You see, the farmer waits patiently for his crops to grow. You can't hurry the process. Let me say that again. You can't hurry the process. So why is it today that the corporate seed church is hurrying the process? Do y'all realize that most church growth today statistically is by people from other churches coming to your church? Statistically, it's not because a church went out and evangelized and brought people in, trained them, prepared them, and sent them back out. It's because this church got moving and grooving, and so people from this church came to this church, and it's just passing the same people around. Statistically, that's how churches grow today. You see, we can't do that. We can't take the summer off. We can't look at the field and go, it'll take care of itself. No, they constantly have to keep working the ground. Keep ready, be prepared. You can't wait, but you also can't make it come any sooner. All you do is faithfully show up every day. Faithfully show up every moment. And by faith, we're looking towards that future. What is it Jesus said? He said, the field is white unto harvest. Pray for the workers of the harvest, because the harvest is here, but the workers are few. If that was 2,000 years ago, what about now? The workers have gotten even more few. Seminaries today are seeing an all-time low when it comes to actual pastors coming out of them. In the state of South Carolina, there are 146 students in Christian ministry degrees out of the 3 Southern Baptist colleges. Most of those, though, are not for pastor. Most of those are for Christian counseling. Pastors are getting farther and farther in between. I'm sure Ms. Tammy can attest to that, being on the pastor search committee. There's fewer and fewer out there. Youth pastors are even harder to find nowadays. Why? Because fewer people are walking into the fields to work it. Patience is the righteous standard of God expects of all believers. To conform to no matter what trial they face, thus patience under persecution becomes another test of genuine faith for James. He also exhorts that true believers to remain patient no matter how severe or relentless their sufferings. You see, James gives us 6 practical perspectives. I did not put these on the screen. I apologize. I did not print these off. 6 practical perspectives. First, enabling believers to patiently endure trials. So enabling believers to patiently endure trials. Secondly, to anticipate the Lord's coming. To anticipate the Lord's coming. Thirdly, recognize the Lord's judgment. Recognize the Lord's judgment. Fourth, follow the Lord's servants. So fourth is follow the Lord's servants. Fifth, understand the Lord's blessing. And then realize the Lord's purpose and consider the Lord's character. Understand his purpose and consider his character. You see, James is taking this group that is being just completely used up, spit out, torn up, and thrown away, and he's saying, you've got to be patient. You've got to stay steadfast. You've got to keep pushing. Why? Because I'm going to strengthen you. There's a strength in your hearts here in verse 8. It says, be patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. And so he's saying, be resolute, be firm, be committed. James wants us not to collapse under the weight of persecution, but instead shore up our hearts. for the second coming. Why? Because the second coming of Christ is near. Do you realize we're closer to the second coming now than we were yesterday? Does that mean it's in 1,000 years? No idea. Does that mean it's in 2? Who knows? He knows. But we keep working. The more persecuted a church is, the more eagerly it anticipates the return of Jesus. Conversely, an affluent, indulgent, worldly church has little interest at the Lord's return. We've talked about that. There are churches that at Easter said, we're not going to mention the blood of Jesus, we're not going to mention the cross, we're not going to mention the resurrection because we don't want to offend people. Why? Because they're an affluent church now that doesn't want to offend the world. Verse 9. Do not grumble against one another, so that you may not be a judge. We talked about judging last week, didn't we? Saying don't grumble because you might do that. And this is a picture, he's picturing Jesus standing at the door, getting ready to come into the courtroom and getting ready to put persecution down. But that persecution tends to lead to grumbling, and James cautioned his readers against that sin. You see, in Philippians chapter 2, verse 14, it says, do all things without grumbling or disputing. Why? Because we can forfeit the reward of Jesus if we grumble and dispute too much. It says that in 2 John, verse 8, watch yourselves that you may not lose what you have worked for, but may win a full reward. Church, what have we worked for? Just question. What have we worked for? This is a personal question for you. Not as a church body, because we could list off all the things that we're involved in, all the different ministries that we try to do outside the church. No. For you personally, what have you worked for? Bringing others to Christ. What else? Raising your family, absolutely. What else? Loving everyone. It's not easy. I was asked this week how I can love someone and not like them, and I said it's pretty easy. You learn how to navigate that. What'd you say, Everly? Yeah? What else? Becoming more like Jesus. Here's the thing. I'm going to stop here tonight, actually, rather than finishing up with a couple next verses I have, because I want y'all to think about that question this week. And let me tell you why. When things go wrong, we tend to complain against and blame others for our miseries. Blaming others is easier than owning our share of the responsibility. And it can be both destructive and sinful. So if you were to answer that question tonight, when you get home and there's nobody else around and you're not trying to, I'm not saying y'all are trying to impress people with your answers, but let's be honest, we don't always answer the most honestly, because if we did, then people might think badly of us. But tonight, when it's just you and Jesus, and he asks you the question, what are you working for? What's your answer to him? Because on the flip side of that, man, are you close to losing it? Are you close to losing what you've worked so hard for? Let me ask y'all something, just a general question. How many times can a pastor in a church mess up before they lose everything? And everybody's thinking the exact same thing. It depends on what it is. But let me answer for everybody. One time. That's all it takes. And they lose everything. The problem is we don't have pastors with character anymore. And that's an overgeneralization, I know that. But some of the guys that are the front runners for all this stuff, well, it's coming out that they had a mistress on the side, or that they embezzled money from their own ministry, or that all these, they're not men of character. So why will the body follow the pastor if the pastor himself is not a man of character? It won't. but they'll also learn to never trust another pastor walking in. You see, the one thing that y'all don't realize is that the pastor that we're going to get, whatever the Lord brings, whoever the Lord brings, will pay for the sins of the pastors before him. If y'all don't believe me, ask Perry. He's walked that road. I can answer for that. I've walked that road. And I guarantee you, if it's Shane, Pastor Shane, he's walked that road. You answer for the guys before you. Why is that? That we hold them to that standard, but we ourselves are not working for the goal that Jesus has placed in our hearts. I told y'all when I finish up chapter 5, we're going to do some topical stuff, getting ready. But the thing is that we have to understand it's not about a guy standing there. It's about the one that died for us, and we are supposed to work for him. So what are you working for? And are you close to losing it, to forfeiting it, because we're grumbling and we're upset and we're blaming others because something bad happened? My Jesus said something bad's going to happen if we live for him. He said it's going to be harder than anything you could ever imagine if we live for him. So are you living for him? Let's pray. Father God, thank you so much again for this time and this opportunity. Continue to lead us and guide us, Father. But Father, tonight, as we lay our heads down, I pray that we're honest with ourselves and we answer the one question, Father, what are we working for? Within the church body, it's very easy to say, I'm working so that others come to know Jesus. It's easy to say that, it's not easy to do it. Father, but what are we working for when it comes to you? And are we close to losing it because we've messed up? Lord, if there's things in our lives that need to be laid down, if there's things in our lives that we're trying to hide from you, which we can't, Father, I pray that we lay them at your feet so that we can confess those things so we can come back and be in right relationship with you. So that the work begins again and we don't forfeit. Lord, your word says, what good is it for us to gain the whole world and yet sacrifice our souls? So I pray that what we're working towards is not to gain more for us, but for you. Lord, use us in the way that you see fit. We love you and we trust you. Praise things in your Son's name.